So the new SAT started in March of 2016. The PSAT actually started in October 2015. So there was a little bit of overlap there. You could have taken the PSAT in October. That would have been the new version. But you could have then taken the SAT in November, and it would have been the old version. But like I said, at this point forward, March 2016 moving forward, the SAT is all going to be the new version. So the old test is out, the new test is in. So time frame wise, that you basically have no choice now but to take the new SAT. Okay, moving on. So the sections that are going to be on this test, we have our English section. Now your English is actually now reading and writing. It used to be two separate scores, now it's one score. So the reading test, just trying to go over some things they're going to be testing you on. They're going to do vocab, but the vocab is not the same as it was in the old SAT. The old SAT, they would give you some obscure words that you probably never heard before and will probably never use again. Now, the new SAT, they're not going to test vocab specifically. They're not going to have a whole section saying, fill in the words that are missing, but they still test vocabulary. They test it in context of the passage. They try to use words with multiple meanings, words that you've actually seen and used, especially depending on how educated you are in vocabulary. They should be words that hopefully you've seen before. So there's still vocab. So I want you to understand, if you're going to a test and you see a word you don't know, it's still important to record those words and their meanings. Not only the meaning that was used on that passage, but the other meanings as well, because they test multiple meanings. Next, they're going to have questions that actually ask you to justify your answers with evidence. So you'll answer a question, but the question after it will say, where in the passage did you find the evidence for that answer? So being able to find evidence is going to be a big part. Obviously, you should be doing that anyway, because that's how you answer reading questions, by looking at evidence in the passage. But they actually have questions that ask you to do that. That's new. There are a few more main idea questions, but still, for the most part, it's finding evidence for your answers. So reading it's a little different than it was before, but reading is reading. Okay. The best part about this new test, the new reading test, is the fact that the vocab is gone, the obscure vocab. Now vocabulary is more relevant to the real world. So I actually kind of like the reading section, honestly. Writing is still going to be testing vocabulary like it did on the old test, but what you'll see on the writing test is that everything's in the form of a passage. So you're answering questions within a passage. So the writing test used to be vocabulary, or sorry, not even vocabulary, grammar rules being tested. So you would just be tested on a certain grammar rule in one question, go to the next question, test another grammar rule, and on and on and on. Well, now you are going to be given passages, and while grammar is tested, you're also going to need to make sure you are understanding the flow of a passage, because they're going to ask you to potentially add a phrase to the end of a paragraph or in between a paragraph, or rearrange sentences or rearrange paragraphs. So you're going to need to make sure you're understanding the flow of the passage. And then again, sometimes you need to understand the author's meaning, because they'll ask you, should you add this sentence? Well, does it add to the author's argument, or does it take away, or is it really obscure and really not related to the main idea? So yes, in a way, the writing section uses some reading strategies, and that's one of the things where I kind of like to talk about how the reading and writing sections are a lot more closely related than they used to be. They used to be completely separate. One was grammar, one was reading. Well, now the grammar is mixed with the reading, and it's all kind of jumbled together, which makes sense that now we have one English score and not a reading and a writing. It can be similar now because it's all in English anyway. So that's your writing section in a nutshell. The math, it's going to be a little bit more emphasis on high-level math. The old SAT, it really didn't go very high in math, maybe a little bit of Algebra 2 if there was any, because some of the Algebra 2 they said was on there. I remember teaching in my classes in Algebra 1 and maybe some in geometry. So it really only went up to Algebra 1 geometry, minor concepts from Algebra 2. Well, now that's not the same. So there's a lot of concepts tested from Algebra 2, and some things that I even remember teaching in my pre-calculus, trigonometry, analytic geometry classes. So there's a greater emphasis on that higher level math. However, it's got a much narrower focus. Algebra is heavy on this new test. Geometry, not so much. Algebra is a big, big focus of the new SAT. So certain keywords they tend to use a lot, and you'll see as we go through the class, a lot of these phrases overlap from arithmetic all the way through advanced algebra. They use the same types of phrases, so I can approach them in a similar manner. We just have to know different rules along the way. Also, another big change is that we have a calculator and a no calculator section. Now, this is my personal opinion. Every opinion can be different, but what I've noticed from my experience is that I feel that the no calculator section is actually a little bit harder than the calculator section. Again, that opinion can be different, but a lot of people are scared of the no calculator section. I actually find it to be easier. The questions are easier. The calculator, hey, they say, hey, you got a calculator, we can make this question really crazy then, I guess. So there, you'll see some crazier ones in the calculator section. Again, that's my opinion. But those are some of the big changes with the math. So with that, again, I just want to give you, a quick summary of some questions. Just kind of go over a couple here. So what I'll do here, so you can see me actually writing, I'm going to switch over now to my screen where you can kind of see me working these problems out on my iPad. So let me switch that over real quick. Okay, so we're doing some sample English questions at this point. So this is going to be the writing section. And one thing you'll notice as we go through the writing section is that you'll see some, you'll see a passage on the left, right? You see a passage and a question associated with it. So I'm actually going to go a little out of order here because my questions are out of order. So this is a passage, and there's some questions associated with it, and I picked a quick sample here. So we have this passage, we got number 1, and there's an underlined portion. So this is going to ask you to try to combine the sentences. So these first two questions are kind of related to grammar. So like number 1, it says, which choice most effectively combines the sentences at the underlined portion? So you go to the sentence, you'll kind of read the two sentences and see how would you best combine them. So in this one it says, the man charged with the crime, Juan Francisco Lopez Sanchez, is a Mexican national who is in the U.S. illegally. And then we have a period. Now we're trying to combine the sentences. So we want to see what kind of relationship do these two sentences have. So as we look, it says, he has been convicted of multiple felonies, and again, 2 is incorrect. We'll fix that. Exported several times. So trying to combine these, you have to understand certain grammar rules to be able to answer this. Well, in this case, we have what's called 2 independent clauses. What you'll notice before, we're talking about Juan Francisco Lopez, and really a description of him. He was a Mexican national. He was in the U.S. illegally. And then they talk about the fact he's been convicted of multiple felonies and exported, should be deported. We'll get to that several times. So what they're doing is they're still talking about Juan Francisco Lopez. They're not talking about how, talking about him, how he's a Mexican national, how he's, been in the U.S. illegally. It's talking about how types of crimes he's committed, how many times he's been exported. So these are related, but they're slightly different. Well, they're 2 independent clauses, and that would be combined by using a semicolon. So the answer choice would be D. So again, you just have to understand certain grammar rules to answer questions such as that. And again, those things we'll go over in the class. Number 2, we already talked about this. This is about multiple meanings of words or word usage. You have to understand exported is not the proper word in this case. Exported is like you're exporting goods. If I want to ship, let's say ship soda to another country, I'm going to export it to that country. But if you're shipping a person to another country, kicking him out of a country, you are deporting that person. So 2 would be C. So those are, again, quick examples, a vocab question, or not a vocab question, a grammar question, then a vocabulary question, and then we have our next question here. It says, at this point, the author is considering adding the following sentence. And the following sentence says, whether by accident or not, homicide rates have inched upwards in San Francisco in recent years after having been in a steady decline since 1993. So these questions, again, you have to understand, does this sentence fit that paragraph? Does it fit the idea of what the author's trying to get across? That's the first thing you want to figure out, because that's going to tell you yes or no, should I add this sentence to this paragraph. So if you come up here, you'll see this first paragraph, and again, if you read it, you'll see they're talking about this murder that happened, and they're talking about the man charged with the crime. They're describing him, and then he says that he maintains the shooting was an accident. So this whole paragraph is talking about this murder and the suspect in it. That's the main idea of this paragraph. Anything that should be added to that should be talking about the murder or the person that is suspected of committing that crime. So when you look at the answer choice, look at the sentence, they're talking about homicide rates, just in general, homicide rates. Well, that's not talking about the crime. It's not talking about the suspect in that crime. Therefore, the answer to this should be no. We don't want to add that because it's not fitting the main idea of that paragraph. So then you go into why. Well, if you look at D, because it contradicts the statements, it's not contradicting any statements. They weren't making statements that homicide rates have been going down. It's not said at all. So that's when you start looking at the reason behind it. Why would it be yes or no? Well, in this case, we decided to no. It's not fitting the main idea. And C gives the better explanation because it blurs the paragraph's focus by adding useless data that is not added to the main idea. So again, you're going to get questions that, in this case, it's somewhat reading. It's about getting main ideas. So you're kind of combining those concepts, those skills, to the writing portion of the test, because this is actually in that writing section. So again, you got grammar, you got vocabulary, you got reading comprehension. It's all in the same section. And I have one more question up here. You'll see number 5. This is going, and you'll see the passage here in just a second. But it says, what is the most logical place in this passage to add the following sentence? This is one of these types of questions where I talk about this a lot in the writing section about transitional phrases, trigger words. In this case, that transitional phrase, that trigger word is going to be the word but. Now, the but is what I call a negative trigger. So this is a negative trigger. So what you're looking for when you see that word in here, so you're saying, okay, so I got the word but. So it says, but San Francisco lawmakers say that the city's sanctuary law wasn't a factor. So what I'm doing, I see the word but, now it's telling me the sentence before should be implying or saying, it doesn't have to say, it can imply, that San Francisco lawmakers say that the city's sanctuary law maybe was a factor. And that negative trigger tells me I'm looking for something that says the opposite. So I'm going to go read my sentences, and I'm going to look for a sentence now. Now I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a sentence that says, hey, maybe this sanctuary law was a factor. I don't know a factor what, but it's a factor. So when you kind of look in here, you start with your sentences. It says before sentence 1, or sorry, after sentence 1, before sentence 1, after sentence 2, or after sentence 3. So I'm looking over here at my sentences, and one thing you'll notice, I circled it here a minute ago. These bracketed sections, and again, it's nice to know that before we walk into a test, right? These bracketed little things here, we got, number 1, that's sentence 1. That's what that means. So I want to say, should I put something before sentence 1 or after? Well, let's read sentence 1. It's probably not going to be before because, based on where we're at right now, there's nothing to say but to. It's, right at the beginning of the paragraph. So it says the tragic murder of Kate Stennell once again underscores the need to end these reckless policies. So they're saying, this murder says we need to end these policies. Says the House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Gulati, who was one of the many to call for a change in immigration law after Stennell's death. So as soon as I read that, I'm seeing something that is kind of opposite to this phrase. He said we need to end these policies. Well, he's then implying that the policies that are in place now aren't good. Maybe they helped cause this murder. Therefore, the sentence that we have right here, but San Francisco lawmakers say the city's sanctuary law wasn't a factor, well, that would kind of imply then that we have to then pick after sentence 1, which would be A, as our answer, because we're saying the opposite of what that sentence said. So again, I can go through, I know this video will be longer, I almost always check each one of those answer choices, but again, it is A in this case because hopefully you can see the difference there between, okay, this sanctuary law was a factor in the sentence 1, but after sentence 1, we want to put the phrase, but maybe it wasn't. Okay? So that's writing. Now, in reading, it's kind of hard to kind of go over a sample reading question with you because you almost want to see the whole passage. I always give you one to give you an idea. Give you a quick idea of how I like to approach questions. In the reading section, you're going to get a lot of questions that have phrases like this. Line 58, line 2, line 3, whatever. And what you want to do in these reading sections is you want to go to these questions first. Figure out, okay, number 5, I need to be on line 58. Now, I'm always going to tell you, and I'm not going to give you all my details, but we will have read up to that line, okay? But before we read anything past this, maybe in the start of that paragraph, you want to read number 5 so you see, okay, now that I read this paragraph around line 58, what am I trying to answer? Okay, so this one I would read the question. The authors offer an opinion of Scott Huettel in line 58 in order to. So why are they bringing this guy up? What's the purpose? So I always say, read the question, but make sure you then understand it. A lot of people will read the question and just go, but you don't even know what you're answering. So take a second to rephrase that question in your own words. The author offers an opinion of Scott Huettel in order to what? So why did they bring this guy up? What's the point? So then you'll go check it out. Neuroscientist Scott Huettel of Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, isn't convinced of the 2-task limit on human multitasking ability. So as I read, I'd say, okay, you may want to highlight that. Why did they bring him up? Well, they said he wasn't convinced. Okay, so that means he is offering maybe a counter argument or something like that. He's not convinced of maybe what was said before. Now again, we haven't read the whole passage at this point, so you haven't read that part, but you can probably get the gist here. He's saying something opposite that was said before, right? He's not convinced of this 2-task limit, so obviously we've been reading about that before line 58. Well, now that you know that and you've answered in your own words, that's key, answer it in your own words, figure out the answer. I'm trying to get a counter argument. I'm looking for something about a counter argument. Now we'll look at our answers. Is he offering further arguments? No, he's not. Offering counter arguments, not further. Does he question what the researchers have done and its validity? Maybe. So keep it. C, is he supporting the researchers? No, he's not. D, is he offering a counter argument into the already presented research inside the text? Yeah, and as you look here, are they questioning it? No, he's more saying he's not convinced. Okay, and again, the first thing that pops in your head, counter argument. Now, like I said, we haven't read the whole passage, so you got to trust me on some of these. That's why I don't like doing a bunch of the reading ones. But again, that's the approach you're going to take. Read the question before you read the actual portion of the passage where the answer should be located. And then once you read the question, you answer it in your own words, then you'll see I use this method I call process elimination, and I kind of check each answer off as I go. Okay. Again, there are more details in there that I'll fill in when we do the class. And finally, I want to do some math questions, so I'll kind of wrap up with those. Some sample math questions. I'm jumping through different concepts, starting with an arithmetic problem. I want to show you how percentages are used throughout the test. So here's one example of an arithmetic question and how I approach it. We have two runners. They're racing against each other. Runner A runs 30% faster than runner B. So this is a phrase that I go over in my class, talking about percentages. So 30% faster means it wants to go up 30%. So you got to understand, if you're going up 30%, 30% faster means you're going to be using this number. And I'll even put the 0 there so you understand it. It's equivalent to 130%. His speed is 130% of runner B's speed. So a lot of students, when they see 30%, they just think, oh, 30%, 0.3. No, it's not 0.3. It's 1.3 because it's 30% faster. So here's how you can set this up. Okay, if you want to set it up, you got to be careful. Make sure you set it up right. Here's how I like to do it. I got A and B equal to each other, right? Well, they're not, right? Runner A is 30% faster. So if runner A is faster, and I want to make these two equal, you got to think, which number needs to go up? Well, the slower one needs to go up, which is runner B. So I multiply that by 1.3. So I have 1.3b equals A. Now they're equal. Because A was 30% faster, so if I make B go up 30%, we got a match. So there's a couple ways I can approach that too. So like I say, when I have questions on that, I'm not going to do 3 or 4 methods in my video. I'm going to show you one method, the one I usually would do first, and then kind of go from there. So in this case, we know runner A is 9.6 miles per hour, because I said 9.6 miles in 1 hour. So that's my rate. So I'll go 9.6 equals 1.3b. And then we divide by 1.3 to get the speed for runner B. And again, certain times you can use calculator if you want. In this case, it's not going to be a perfect answer, but you should get about 7.3846. So you'd say approximately 7.4, which would be C. Again, that's just working with percentages. You'll see that gets used, this concept of percentages gets used throughout the class because it gets used all over the SAT. Whether it's algebra, arithmetic, doesn't matter. Okay, so you'll see that actually as I go here. There's another question that you can see. So this one is kind of like algebra. We have a recent employee sale. Jason, he bought a pair of shoes at 25% off the store's price. The amount he paid the cashier was $Y, which included a 6% sales tax. So we got all these numbers getting thrown around. But I'm going to highlight a couple as I go. We got a 25% off the store's price. He paid Y dollars. That included a 6% sales tax. A key on this, and I'll even talk about it as we just did it earlier, that means 1.06 because you're going up 6%. When you pay sales tax, your price goes up. It doesn't go down. You're not paying 6% of the total amount. You're going up. It's going up 6% of the total amount. So in terms of Y, which of the following represents the original price of the shoes? So the original price of the shoes we need to solve for. I can call original, let's call it original X. So they don't have, that's what we're trying to find. Okay? So in this situation, what you would do, you say, okay, how is this price being figured out? So as I'm looking at the problem, it says the amount he paid the cashier is Y. That's the final amount. So that's going to be what everything calculates to. So you're going to take your original price first. We're going to take X. And what you're going to do is you're going to take that price and do 2 things to it. You're going to take 25% off. Then you're going to pay for it. Now when you pay for it, you're going to add 6% sales tax to it. So I'm going to take my price. I'm going to take 25% off. Now 25% off, you want to get a decimal for that? Well, that decimal is going to be 0.75. It's going to be 1 minus 25%. Again, that's another concept I go over in my class. If I got our 75%, it's 0.75. I have my 6% sales tax. Remember I said that's 1 point. You're going up, right? You always remember if you're going up, you got to put the 1 in front. So 1.06, that's going to equal the price you pay. So if I'm solving this, I can divide by 0.75. They want to know what is X, what's the original price, and you divide both sides by those values. And that will give you your answer, which in this case would be D. So again, there are other ways to get to this. I will tell you there's a plugging in strategy, which I'll go over in the class, that you can, if you get stuck on any of these problems, and this is one of the types that you could get stuck on, it depends, I'm going to give you another tool for your belt, and that's going to be plugging in. So you'll see that method if you take the class and kind of go through the lessons, and you'll see it as I teach it. Okay? Again, I just try and go through a few math questions. I love math. Can't help it. So next up here, I got John. He's buying vanilla and peach yogurt cups. Yum. With his friend Lucas. John bought 2 vanilla yogurt cups for X dollars each. This brings up another phrase that I like to talk about in the class a lot. The phrase each. Each or per, actually. Now, per can mean divide, but a lot of times the way they're being brought up in the SATs are being brought up in terms of rates. Rates, when you say the word per, you're multiplying. Okay? But it can also, depending on if it's, I guess, when you say rates, there are 2 different types of rates, like miles per hour is division. But if you're saying you're paying $2 per month, okay, that's multiplication. So again, I go over those instances in class. They love the word each, though. Each means multiply. Okay, so it means I'm going to multiply. In this case, because I have the word each. Lucas bought 1 peach yogurt cup, which was $1 more than the price of 1 vanilla yogurt cup. And they said John and Lucas split the cost of the yogurt evenly, and each paid 7% sales tax. That was nice of them. So which of the following represents the dollars that each of them paid? Each of them. Okay, so we got John's buying vanilla peach yogurt cups. Friend Lucas, John bought 2 of them for X dollars each. So this is where we're going to start here. He bought 2 vanilla yogurt cups for X dollars each. So we want to get that price. Well, that's going to be 2X. Lucas, so John bought the 2. Lucas bought 1 peach yogurt cup, which is $1 more than the price of vanilla one. So he bought 1 peach yogurt cup. It was $1 more. $1 is another key phrase I use. More means plus. So it's $1 more than a vanilla yogurt cup. So the vanilla yogurt cup was X dollars, so if it's $1 more, it's X plus 1. Okay? Those are your 2 prices. Now they want to split the cost evenly and pay a 7% sales tax. So if you're going to split something evenly, you need to find the average. You cut it in half, right? Well, to find the average, you add them up and then divide by 2. I'll put in the tax in just a second. Let's split the cost at this point, and then they'll go take it up to the register. They'll pay with their 7% sales tax. So this would be 3x plus 1 all over 2, which, again, at this point, you can leave it like this. But because they have these all separated, I'm going to write it as, and I'll even put it in decimal form because they have decimals right now. So 3 halves would be 1.5x plus 1 half, which would be 0.5. So this is the price. If they split it evenly, they're paying that price. So now that we have that price, they want to pay 7% sales tax. Remember I said about the sales tax, you're going up a certain percentage. In this case, we're going up by 7%. So you're going to multiply by 1.07. So we're going to multiply by 1.07. You can probably narrow this down if you look at it. If you multiply everything by 1.07, aren't your numbers going to go up? Right? Makes sense because you're multiplying by a number greater than 1. So I need a number bigger than 1.5. So that's not B, it's not D, and it's not A. And I also am going to add 0.5. Actually, I got the X's wrong on that. Some of these had X's. The X's, I'm looking for the X value to be greater than 1.5. So it's not going to be A. That's not greater than 1.5. B is 0.07. That's too small. C is pretty big. Probably too big, honestly. Because to get 1.5 to become 3, I have to multiply by 2. That ain't going to work. So it can't be C. D looks about right because if you multiply by a number just greater than 1, well, you're probably not going to be much bigger than 1.5. So it'd be D in this case. You also notice I distribute that over here. 1.07 times 0.5. It's going to be a number just a little bit bigger than 0.5. Well, 0.535 would match that. So your answer choice is D. I don't even need this calculator. You can use it if it's a calculator section, but if it's not, don't use it. So again, I try to teach those things as well because I want to go through problems without a calculator unless you have to use it, because you may be on a no calculator section and you can't use it. Okay? Alright, keep going here. Math is fun. Okay, so here I got a system of equations problem using the phrase her. I just talked about that a minute ago, right? So we have our system of equations. Now I talk about in the class there are 3 types of equations that you'll use typically in a system of equations. You can have your quantity equation. Well, quantity equation is just x plus y equals a number. You have your dual rate equation, which you'll see here. We have like 2x plus 3y equals a number. Typically those associated with costs. And then you have your comparison equations where, like, you sold twice as many hot dogs as you did hamburgers. And you have x equals 2y, or 1/2 x equals y, or 3x equals y, or whatnot like that. Okay? So in this case, we have a gas station. They're selling 2 types of gas. We got regular at $2.20 per gallon, and premium at $3 per gallon. This is a dual rate equation. And again, you'll see words like each or per, and you'll know, oh, that means multiply. I got a dual rate equation. So I'm going to have 220, so 2.2 for regular, and premium is $3 per gallon, so plus $3 for premium. I don't know what it adds up to, but I'll tell you, you're going to be adding them up. Okay, and so at the end of the day, the cashier finds that receipts total $680. So we're dealing with cost here because these are the costs. So that's going to equal $680. And then that there are 280 gallons of gas sold. That's going to be a quantity. How much did we sell? 280 gallons. So again, I said quantity is always x plus y equals a total. In this case, that's r plus p equals 280. And we got our total. Okay, so these are two typical system of equations. So now we just need to solve. So if we're going to solve, again, I always tell people, hey, if you got a decimal here, you don't like the decimal, you can get rid of the decimal. It's okay. It's very simple in this case. I'll show you how to do it. You multiply by 10. You don't have to do this, by the way. I'm just giving you this option. So this would be 22r plus 30p equals 6,800. Now that I have that, let's take a look. I'm trying to solve this using a system of equations method called elimination. I want to get rid of either R or P. Now, this one wants regular gas sold for the answer, so I'm going to try to get rid of P. If I get rid of P, I can solve for R. So I'm going to multiply the second equation using my elimination method. I'm going to multiply by 30, and I'll bring that over. So if you multiply by 30, that'll be 30R plus 30P, and then 280 times 30. And to speed things up, if you didn't have this would probably be a calculator one, but if you didn't, you can still do this by hand. It'd be 8,400. So at this point, now I want to eliminate. I'm going to eliminate by probably adding, in this case, adding a negative or subtracting. So I'm going to subtract these. You could flip this so the bottom equation's on top and subtract that way, but it's not going to matter. So we subtract, that's going to give me negative 8r. The p's are going to cancel. You have 6,800 minus 8,400, negative 1,600. And then again, they're both negatives. That's okay because the negatives are going to cancel when you divide. So you divide this by negative 8, you're going to get your negative or positive 200. So r is 200. Done. System of equations. Again, what I like about some of these questions SAT-wise is that it's very similar, honestly, to a lot of questions you do in class. This is something that you probably would have seen at some point in your algebra class. We're doing it again. So it's nice. You got to have those skills. You don't want to go in into class not knowing how to solve an algebra problem. It's going to be difficult. You're still going to benefit from the class, but it helps if you have these skills coming in, or at least remember learning them. So I just need a refresher. That's where I come in. Okay. All right. I just got a couple more. I love doing math. So if you like seeing math, hey, great. If you don't, then fast forward while you're watching this video. So now we're doing some more heavier algebra. I'm trying to go kind of show you the progression of the algebra, but as I show that progression, I want to show that there are some similarities. Hopefully I'm kind of showing you that with some of the percentage concepts, the each and per, what those mean in terms of word problems. This is going to be something a little different, talking about functions, factoring, things like that. Now we're moving up a little bit in the difficulty. So if the graph of function f in the xy plane has zeros at plus or minus 1/2, which of the following could define f? So we need to find a function that has these zeros. Now one thing I teach in the class, I talk about what they mean by zeros. Well, zeros can be called multiple things. Zeros can be called roots. They can be called factors. They can be called x-intercepts. Or zeros. They all mean the same thing. I'm going to focus on that phrase right there, factors. Okay, we need to find the factors of these functions in these answer choices. I'm looking for plus or minus 1/2 to show up. So this one, if you look at A, this would be 4, this would be -4, and this is not a difference of squares. If it was a difference of squares, then this would be my answer choice. This is a sum of squares. A sum of squares is not factorable, so A will not work. Now D looks like a difference of squares maybe, so let's test that one out and see what we get. Again, this is where we can talk about some of the factoring rules. Some of these are some special factors we can test out pretty quick. This would be 4x squared plus 2. This would be 4x squared minus 2. Now I know a sum of squares, even though, say 2 is not a perfect square, square root of 2 squared is 2. You can make any of these a sum of squares. If you're taking two terms and adding them, it's a quadratic and a constant, it's not factorable, not going to work. This is going to work though, possibly. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to factor out a 4. Let's see what I get. Okay, if I pull out a 4, I'm going to get x squared minus 1. Not x squared minus 1, I'm sorry. If I factor out a 2, don't factor out a 4, I'm going to get 2x squared minus 1. And then if I set this equal to 0, we're going to have a slight problem. You can do a difference of squares if you want. I know students don't like that, so I'll just go 2x squared minus 1 equals 0. And you get x squared equals 1/2, but we want x to be plus or minus 1/2, which means when I square root it, I'm not going to have 1/2 anymore, so it's not D. So I'm showing you these different factoring concepts, right? Okay, so let's clear that. So I have space. And then you look at something like, say, C. So C, if you notice, is going to be a perfect square factor. If you don't, you still just factor it like you normally would anyway, right? So this is going to be, let's see, to get 16, that's going to be 4x squared. 4x squared. 1 is 1 and 1, and if you subtract them, you are going to get minus 8. So both these factors are the same. Set 4x squared minus 1 equal to 0. That gives you x squared equals 1/4. Square root it, and you get x equals plus or minus 1/2. So we found it finally. So again, you see they're basically going to be testing you on your factoring rules. You got to know how to factor, right? And again, some of these, knowing your certain factoring rules, like a sum of squares is not factorable, will save you a lot of time, a lot of headache trying to factor something that can't be factored. You want to be able to go through these quickly and understand them and not get stuck. Remember your time. All right, so you want to be comfortable. All right, next up, 2 more, almost done. We got a radioactive isotope decays an annual rate of 23%. So we're decaying at 23%. Remember, I talked about percentages before. If you're going down 23%, that's going to be 1 minus 0.23. So again, you got 0.77 for your rate. You got to remember that. Keep repeating. So you can go all the way through advanced algebra from arithmetic. Same percentage concept. That's one of the things I'm trying to tie as I'm going through all these questions. I want you to understand that basic idea about percentages. All right. And then we had initial amount of 250 grams. So here's what I teach in the class. You have to understand this. A times b to the x is your exponential equation. In that exponential equation, b is your rate, which we just found to be 0.77 because we did 1 minus 0.23. And a is your initial amount. So as you look at this, you just need to match them up. It's pretty easy if you know what you're doing. Initial was 250 grams, so it's not A or B. And your rate was not 0.23 because you know you're going down 23%. It's 0.77. So again, these are things that you're taught in class, and maybe you knew this, maybe you didn't. Let's say you didn't. That's a pretty easy question once you actually learn the concepts that are tested on the test. Because again, it's a narrower focus, like I said earlier, right? If it's a narrower focus, this isn't so bad, okay? Because you know what things are going to be tested and you're ready for it. All right, last one. This is real quick. This is something that may look hard, but again, once you're comfortable with these types of questions, super easy. I got an exponential equation. How do we solve it? Well, here's how you solve it. If you have an exponential equation, get the bases equal. Here's what I mean by that. 5x plus 4 equals 25 is 5 squared. X plus 3. Done. Bases are equal. Now, if the bases are equal, we need to get the exponents equal. Before I do that, let's simplify. Know that when you multiply power to a power, when you raise a power to a power, you multiply your exponents. So 5 to the x plus 4 equals 5 to the 2x plus 6. Okay, so now I have my bases equal. I have my exponents. Set them equal to each other. X plus 4 equals 2x plus 6. Subtract the x, subtract the 6. You get negative 2. Done. Okay, so again, I know that's a lot of questions right there, but I'm hoping if you actually watch this whole video, you kind of see there's a lot that you can learn from this test, and you can make a question that initially might throw you off without any prep, but once you're prepared and understand how to approach the questions, you're going to be a lot more confident with the test. You're going to be a lot more comfortable with the questions that are on it, and you'll be able to go through it a lot quicker, and your score is going to go up. Okay, so I'll bring you back to my presentation here. One last thing I want to talk about to kind of wrap things up. Get through all the questions that we just did. So hopefully you kind of see how I teach. Sometimes you can kind of see that as I am going through the questions, but I want to clarify these. What I'm going to do in this class, I'm going to focus on what you're taught at school. We're teachers. We're all teachers. We do this for a living. We know what's taught in class. We know what you are taught. We want to make sure we take those skills that you're taught and reinforce them. And not only that is once we kind of reinforce those ideas, then as I like to say, add tools to your belt. Say, okay, this is the skills that you need to answer these questions. Now, if you're stuck, which happens, here's a couple little strategies you can use. I didn't show you any of those strategies yet. That's something that I'll save for the class. But again, some of those questions I did, there's another way of solving them. And those strategies are universal. They're used throughout the test. So again, you want to obviously know those tools. So if you get stuck, you have an alternate approach. Like I said, when I talk about that focus, I said the test, there's a lot of things you learn in school. Like if I took everything you learn in school, put it in a book, it'd be really big. But my workbook's about that thick. Yeah, about that thick. It's not that thick. So we take all those things that you've learned and we narrow it down to the stuff that you need for the test. We know what's on the test. Okay. Next, we're going to give students a specific approach for each section. So I'm going to tell you, you have this much time to do this section. Here's how you're going to do it. You see this question, this is how you approach it. So once you learn those things, you're not going to be surprised by any question on the test. You'll see the question, you'll say, I know how to approach that question, and you'll attack it. You're not going to hesitate. You're going to do. Because remember, you're timed. So you want to know exactly how to do every question. So that's why I go over every question. There's not going to be one question we're not going to talk about in this class. I'd like to tie in a reading throughout the reading and writing test. As I told you earlier, the reading and writing sections are very similar. So the reading strategies, if it can get used in the writing test, you're going to use it. Okay? Those skills that we learn from the reading and writing sections, we can then apply to our essay, which is a whole other beast. But again, I teach the essay towards the end because I want to teach those other strategies first and then use those in our essay portion. And finally, every question, when we go over it, I always say use the official SAT study guide. That is the best way to prepare. You prepare with official SAT questions. If you're not doing that, you are basically practicing on fake questions. Why practice on fake questions when real questions are out there, especially with the test being changed? No one really knows what those questions are going to look like but the College Board. So use their questions, use their book. Okay? So with that, hopefully you learned a lot from this video. I did talk about a lot of things, but hopefully you got a lot out of it. Good luck on the test. Hopefully I'll see you in class soon.